and welcome to the First Love Project podcast. I'm Jori Schaefer, your host and creator, and I'm so glad you're here. It's Tuesday, and on this podcast, we look at different days of the week at different sections of Scripture and take a little short devotional thought and look at God's grace and His love and His mercy and how much He loved us that we see throughout all Scripture. You know, Scripture is a wonderful story of His love and His grace from Genesis to Revelation. But we don't need to look at it as just little parts. We need to look at when we're in the Scripture as little parts of a whole wonderful story. And we should want to know all of that story. You don't want to just have a little part of the story and then not know the whole picture. The whole picture is wonderful. And God loved us so much that He sent His Son to this earth to die for us so that we who are sinners could be brought back into right relationship with Him. And we see that from all throughout Scripture. And so I love that. I love that we get this opportunity. Now, if you've listened to my other podcast, we go into much more detail on that each day. This one is just a short little devotional podcast for the day because, as you know, I encourage you to find multiple ways to be in the Word each day, multiple ways to be encouraged. This is also a video podcast and not just an audio. And so if you're watching on YouTube, welcome. So please do consider sharing this podcast with someone who you think it may be a blessing to it. But today's Tuesday. And so on Tuesdays, my plan is for us to look at God's grace as we see it in the Gospels. And so what better way to kick off this podcast than to talk about how grace and truth came through Jesus. And so our verse for the day, our focus verse is, and I'm looking at my timer here, is John, the Gospel of John. That's at the beginning of the New Testament. And we're going to begin in verse 14. And I want you to hear this. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen His glory. Glory is of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. John bore witness about Him and cried out, "This was He of whom I said, He who comes after me ranks before me, because He was before me. For from His fullness we have all received grace upon grace." And here is the focus verse. For the law was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God, but the only God who is at the Father's side, He has made Him known. I love this. You know, we do see the grace of God. What is grace? Grace is God's riches given to us at Christ's expense. We did not deserve it. It is a free gift that God would love us so, that He would send His Son, that He would have mercy on us, that He would allow us to be forgiven, that He would allow us a way to be brought back into right relationship with Him. Friends, that is grace, and it is by grace that we're saved through faith. And then He gives us the grace to walk through each day. His grace is sufficient for everything we walk through. We can't walk through this world without trouble. In this world, we will have trouble, Jesus said, but be of good cheer. I've overcome the world, He also said. And so we can be encouraged, and we should be so thankful for that grace. Grace and truth came through Jesus. Remember, yesterday we were in the law and we talked about how the Lord made us in His own image. That was the first instance of grace. And then He had that plan all the way back in Genesis after the fall, after the Adam and Eve sinned, about how we could be restored. And we'll talk about that, Lord willing, in a couple of Mondays or maybe next Monday. But He loved us so that He had this plan to send Jesus, and grace came through Jesus. Grace has a name. It's Jesus. Jesus, that Word made flesh to dwell among us. Do you know Him today? Do you know Him? If you don't, please just come to know Him. Draw closer to Him. He wants you to be saved. Blessings to you, friends. Until next time.